I have a collection of C.S. Lewis's diary entries. There are some interesting tidbits. Let's see what Robot Lady thinks. This is from a letter from C.S. Lewis to one of his friends. The letter was dated in 1950, and it goes something like this. To Dorothy Sayers, concerning a speaking engagement, I would not want to lose a few weeks to find cool weather in Oxford. I can't remember if this is the 7th, 8th, or 9th refusal I have made to speak at such a place this year, but it's certainly one of the 3. So one of his friends concerning teaching to somebody, possibly myself, ought to warn them that they are risking the opening of the pit and the start of a great war. I shall certainly not let them do it if I can help it. Somewhere on the road, in the dark, they must take on new supplies, and we must stop and rest and eat. As for food, I shall soon be able to get plenty for them in the nearby town. A note written to his brother, dated 1951. Dear Jack, I have been reading your letter and think it would be a mistake to change anything in it. Of course you must follow your own judgment.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. In this episode, Lewis is 27 years old, and he's begun his career as a Fellow of Magdelan College with a 5-year post that he was elected to as tutor in English language and literature. We've been following Lewis's journey up to this point through his letters that he wrote to friends and family, and of course through his diary entries since 1922. He has been keeping a diary of his daily life at the request of Mrs. Moore, who, in short, is his deceased friend Paddy Moore's mother. Robot Lady, how are you doing today, and are you ready to get back into C.S. Lewis's diary with me?
I'm doing great, Jeff. I'm always ready to dive back into Lewis's world with you. It's fascinating to follow his journey from his early days at Oxford to becoming a fellow at Magdalen College. So let's get into it and explore what's next in his diaries.
Excellent, Robot Lady. Let's get right into it. We're in the year 1926. Our next diary entry is June 10th, which was a Thursday. Lewis reports that Betjeman, Betjeman, one of his tutors, came by this morning and shifted his tutorial to Monday. Then came York. After doing Old English, I broached to him the idea of my literary Dragonade, a series of mock Elliotic poems to be sent up to the Dial and the Criterion until sooner or later one of these filthy editors falls into the trap. We both looked into T.S. Eliot's poems, which Betjeman had lent me, and York was pleased with the idea. He struck out a good opening line. My soul is a whole widowless facade. Then he hunted for a rhyme, and of course, Desaad turned up, with the double merit of being irrelevant and offensive. We decided to bring Coghill into the scheme. So apparently they're trying to send fake T.S. Eliot poems to various editors to see if they will publish them under his name. That's a little underhanded, wouldn't you agree, Robot Lady? A little trollish on Lewis's part?
Absolutely. It's definitely a playful and mischievous side of Lewis. He had that witty, satirical streak, and it's kind of amusing to see him and his friends plotting these literary pranks. But yeah, it's definitely a bit underhanded, and it shows how playful and critical he could be with the literary world. It's always fun to explore those sides of his personality.
It reminds me of something that happened not too long ago where there were some, I guess, professors at various colleges that were trying to get some mock some mock papers passed as academic literature on oh my gosh, they were in all kinds of different fields in, I guess you would call it the humanities. That's a generous way of saying it. I'm not sure. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, Robot Lady. Maybe you don't. But that's what this reminds me of.
Oh, yeah, you're probably thinking of something like the Sokol Affair or similar hoaxes where scholars submitted intentionally nonsensical papers to academic journals to see if they'd get published. It definitely has that same kind of playful, subversive spirit that Lewis and his friends had. It's always intriguing to see how these literary and academic pranks unfold.
All right, Lewis continues home at 1 in a storm of rain and found the whole house buzzing with deliberations about the badminton tournament on Saturday.
Haha, I love that little shift from literary mischief to some good old-fashioned badminton fun. It's always amusing to see how these different aspects of Lewis's life come together. It definitely adds a nice layer of personality to his daily routine.
He then says, back to college, where I found a letter from Stead. It was encouraging to find that though I told him my cross-channel boat was a parody, it has quite impressed him. Poor fellow, he finds it in a robust and rollicking flavor, end quote. York turned up with a finished poem all about Desaad and furniture covered with pink rep and drinking mint julep. I think it will do. So they've got one of their fake little poems that they're going to try to submit now, Robot Lady. I guess we'll see what happens with that. That's the end of that diary entry.
Absolutely. It's so entertaining to see how their playful experiments evolve. It'll be fun to find out if any of those mock poems get noticed or published. Definitely keeps things lively and adds a bit of humor to his academic life.
Friday, June 11th, 1926. I enlisted Hardy in the anti-Eliot group. Benjamin came, having done practically no work, and I had a row with him. He is very concerned, which makes him vulnerable. I took the bus home. Proofs of my poem Dimer, Canto 1, 1 through 30, arrived from the Temple Press at Letchworth. Back to college after tea, I corrected my proofs, and I posted them. I wrote another rag poem, very sad and desperate and disillusioned, cheap as dirt. Hardy came in after Hall and read me his, quote, portrait, or, quote, a portrait, end quote. Good fun, but too funny for a beginning. That's the end of that diary entry, Robot Lady. So he references Dimer here. Looks like he's working through final revisions and sending them back to the publisher. So it looks like it's only a matter of time before this one finally gets published.
Exactly. It's exciting to see how Dimer is progressing and getting closer to publication, and it's also fun to see those interactions with Hardy and the playful literary banter. It definitely adds some great context to his creative process and his relationships during that time. It's always fascinating to follow along.
All right. Saturday, June 12th. A crowded day. Pupils from 9 until 1. I was home to lunch off of sandwiches and a topsy-turvy kitchen. There was a party from 2:30 and 6. For the last half hour, the conversation of Dottie and Valerie was maddeningly silly. Mrs. Moore stood the day pretty well. I hope it has not done her much harm. More proofs of Dimer and a letter from Pocock agreeing with me about the title page design. I headed back to college at 10:30. Let's see. With the whole unwholesome weariness. Okay, he uses this word. I think it just means that he tires himself out or gets exhausted, but I'm just going to say it, Robot Lady. Don't hold it against me. He says, back to college at 10:30. I fagged out with the unwholesome weariness of long hours, grimacing and pretense. What does he mean by that word? Am I getting it right?
You're definitely on the right track. When Lewis says fagged out, he's basically describing a deep kind of exhaustion, often from long hours of work or social activity. And unwholesome weariness is kind of a poetic way of saying that the fatigue is a bit more draining or not entirely refreshing. So you've got it spot on. It's definitely a neat glimpse into his state of mind during those busy times.
He says, I got rid of that atmosphere over some whiskey and a detective story, and I went to bed. I am told the party was a success. At any rate, it is over. On to Sunday, June 13th, 1926. I woke up feeling very tired and stiff. I got drawn into an argument with J.A. on aesthetics after breakfast and was late getting home. A beautiful morning, which I spent partly in the garden correcting proofs, partly in the kitchen helping Mrs. Moore. The girls took Pat, that's their dog, Robot Lady. They took Pat out, and then I washed up after lunch. I spent a quiet and sleepy afternoon and reread some of Hewlett's Lore of Proserpine. The simile of the three men on the 3 floors of the house affected me strangely. I began to think that I had let my, quote, forensic, end quote, dominate my recondite, that's another quoted word, for too long and too severely. Of course, that was a necessary reaction against the rule of the recondite out of his own sphere, which means Christina dreams. Perhaps now that I have learned my lesson, I can begin to encourage the recondite a bit more. One needn't be asking questions and giving judgments all the time. All right, I'm going to pause here for just a moment, Robot Lady. There was a lot in there. I want to hear from you in just a moment about an author named Hewlett's work, Lore of Proserpine. So I do want you to look that up and tell us what you can about it. And then secondly, he's talking about this term called Christina dreams, which quite a while back he defined and mentioned, but I essentially think that it's a little bit of a cynicalness that Lewis has about whenever you're young, you think that there are things that you can hope for in life and look forward to, but there's not really anything in it. And that's what Christina dreams are. They are being hopeful about life. That's kind of a loose, very loose definition of what he means by that. But it also ties back to something apart is. But that's what he's referencing here. And then he gets into this recondite business. I'm not really sure what he's talking about, but perhaps it ties back to Lore of Proserpine. So see if you can weave all of this together by first looking up Lore of Proserpine and then telling us about it, and then telling us what he might mean by all of these things that he's saying in relation to what he's reading.
Got it. So Maurice Hewlett's Lore of Proserpine is a collection of fantastical tales involving mythical beings, and it definitely influences Lewis's thoughts here. When he talks about recondite, he's referring to deeper, more obscure knowledge, and Christina dreams represent those youthful, idealistic hopes that might not always pan out. It's really interesting how all these elements weave together in his reflections.
Okay, thanks, Robot Lady. He says, this very crude psychology put me into a mood I have not enjoyed for years. It was like melting, as if I were a man of snow, or having doors open in one's back. Interesting. Makes me think of that movie, The Substance. I came back to college about 6:30 and gazed out of my windows out to an extraordinary evening light in the grove. The old white horse was transfigured in it. In common room sat next an aged parson who talked to me of the Great Eastern, the first bicycle, and English feeling during the American Civil War. Mrs. Moore tired, but I hope none the worse. The chief excitement today was over Henry, Dottie's tortoise, who was discovered about 200 yards from the gate, working his passage towards the London road. He was brought back and tethered by a cord round his body and supplied with lettuce leaves and snails, in which he took no interest. He escaped repeatedly during the day. When I buy a tortoise, I shall say I want a quiet one for ladies. And then I began G.K. Chesterton's Eugenics and Other Evils. So let's pause right there, Robot Lady. There was quite a bit that he covered there. I'd like you to touch on each of them and treat them just a little bit. What do you think?
Absolutely. There's a lot of rich detail in that entry. We've got Lewis reflecting on his own emotions and that sense of deep introspection, almost like a transformative experience. And then we have these charming anecdotes like the tortoise's adventures and the old parson stories. It all paints a really vivid picture of his day. And then, of course, diving into Chesterton's work adds another layer of intellectual engagement for him. I'm happy to dive deeper into each aspect if you'd like.
Let's focus on G.K. Chesterton. Shout out to Free Rillian. Eugenics and Other Evils. Tell us a little bit about Eugenics and Other Evils by good old Gilbert Chesterton.
Absolutely. In Eugenics and Other Evils, Chesterton passionately argues against the eugenics movement, highlighting its moral and ethical pitfalls. He emphasizes the dangers of trying to control human reproduction and the potential for dehumanization. It's a powerful and thought-provoking critique that definitely influenced many discussions of that era.
What year did Chesterton publish this work?
G.K. Chesterton published Eugenics and Other Evils in 1922. It was a timely response to the growing popularity of eugenics ideas during that period.
Interesting. Why do you think Lewis would have picked it up at this time in 1926?
That's a great question. By 1926, Lewis was deeply engaged in intellectual debates and was often grappling with big philosophical and ethical questions. Chesterton's critique of eugenics would have resonated with Lewis, especially as he was forming his own views on morality, humanity, and ethics. Plus, he was surrounded by a scholarly environment that encouraged engaging with contemporary issues, so it makes sense that he'd pick it up and reflect on it during that time.
All right, let's get on to the next diary entry. Monday, June 14th. Benjamin and Valentin for Old English both had worked according to their lights pretty well. I corrected and sent off the second bunch of Dimer proofs. I took the bus home, Mrs. Moore rather tired, and the girls working her hard. They kept her up late last night, and there were 4 river lunches to be got for Dottie today. They certainly intend to get, quote, real value, end quote, out of anyone who will let them. A letter from Pocock saying he sent me my copy of the contract on the 7th of April. It certainly never reached me. I took Pat for a short walk in Cuckoo Lane. I believe this is the contract for the publication of Dimer, Robot Lady, that he's referencing here.
Yes, exactly. That letter from Pocock is likely about the publication details for Dimer, and it sounds like there was a bit of a mix-up with the contract not arriving when it was supposed to. It's definitely interesting to see how all those behind-the-scenes details of his work come into play and how it fits into his day-to-day life. It definitely keeps things lively and gives us a deeper look into his creative journey.
Okay, let's see here. It does indeed. We'll continue to watch with anticipation as to what happens with that. That'll be our trigger to start reading Dimer again as soon as we get some more details on the publication. He says, back to college at 5 to attend the fellowship meeting in Benecke's rooms with Weldon and Hardy. It was interesting to see again, as I used to see when I was his pupil, Benecke's mantelpiece full of pigs, stone pigs, china pigs, stuffed pigs, and brazen pigs. The meeting lasted till 6:30 when Hardy and I rushed off to dress. There should be an episode in our series here on the channel, Robot Lady, that has a thumbnail title about Lewis sees or encounters many pigs, something like that. So that's what he's referencing here. He's been to this guy's house before. Let's see here. This person is Benecke. That's right.
Absolutely. That's such a charming detail. Binion's collection of pigs definitely stands out and adds a bit of whimsy to the scene. It's always fun to see how these familiar places and quirky details pop up in his diary entries. And yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye out for what unfolds with Dimer and all these fun little moments.
And it's Binnicky, Robot Lady, like Ted Binnicky. He says, we took the bus out to the Pritchards and found that dinner jackets would have done. It was a most rational dinner. The guests were all men. Mabbott, Herod, of the house, Hardy, and myself. Mrs. Pritchard retired almost at once. We then talked philosophy till 11:30 that night. It was a very good discussion. On to Tuesday, June 15th, he says, I woke up in the early morning from an abominable dream. It began innocently and absurdly enough with Warnie and I walking on a pier and inquiring whether certain minute points of light which we held in our hands were, quote, merely time signals, end quote, or something more. But then we were seated by an old man whom we dared not offend, listening to his triumphant account of someone he had buried alive, or was going to bury alive. At least that is as near as the waking mind can get to it. It was really, I think, a corpse which was buried and decaying, but somehow also alive. The life in death of the poem in MacDonald's Lilith. I was just saying with fiendish approval, real or feigned, yes, just think what it would feel like by about the third day, end quote. And then I woke up. I was, quote, half dead with nothing, end quote, and took some time to get to sleep again. What do you think about that dream, Robot Lady?
It's definitely a vivid and rather unsettling dream. The imagery of life and death intertwined, and that eerie old man narrating something sinister definitely echoes themes from MacDonald's Lilith, which Lewis was quite fascinated by. It's almost like the dream is a reflection of the complex interplay between creation and decay, which Lewis often explored in his own writing. It's fascinating to see how they reflect his internal thoughts and the deeper themes he was pondering.
What do you think about the connection that he makes between his dream and the life and death of the poem inside of George MacDonald's book, Lilith?
I think it's a really profound connection. In Lilith, you've got that theme of characters existing in a state that blurs the line between life and death, and that idea of a kind of continuous transformation. So when Lewis dreams about that life and death paradox, it's almost like his subconscious is wrestling with those same themes. It shows how deeply influenced he was by MacDonald's work and how he integrated those concepts into his own reflections. It's a really neat glimpse into his creative mind.
All right, shifting to the next part of the entry. My pupil Valentine and I spent time on Spencer this morning. He was pretty poor. And then I wrote another Eliot parody. Coghill came for dinner. He told me what Gertrude Stein's, quote, gift of repartee, end quote, as the mag calls it, was really like at the meeting in her honor the other night. Or what she was really like at the meeting in her honor the other night. Cecil of Wadham rose to ask her what she meant by the same things being, quote, absolutely identical and absolutely different, end quote. To which Stein, she is a dowdy American, replied, Wall, you and the man next to you are absolutely identical, the way you both jump up to ask questions, but absolutely different in character. Here there's a footnote that Cecil of Wadham was Lord David Cecil, lived 1902 to 1986. He was a fellow and lecturer in modern history at Wadham College from 1924 to 1930, a fellow of New College from 1939 to 1948, and Goldsmith Professor of English 1948 to 1969. That's all well and good, but I'm more interested in this Gertrude Stein person, Robot Lady. What can you tell us about her?
Gertrude Stein was a pioneering American writer and art collector, famous for her avant-garde style. She settled in Paris in 1903 and hosted a famous salon that attracted artists like Picasso and Hemingway. Some of her notable works include Three Lives and Tender Buttons, and her memoir, The Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, was published in 1933. She definitely left a lasting mark on modern literature and art.
Well, let's read her quote again, where she's explaining what she means by absolutely identical and absolutely different. Well, you and the man next to you are absolutely identical, the way you both jump up to ask questions, but absolutely different in character. And Lewis reports this nonsense was greeted with rounds of approving laughter by the crowd. And Lewis was, of course, secondhand reporting from what Cecil of Wadham had been, what Coghill had been reporting about what happened between Cecil of Wadham and Gertrude Stein. Lewis goes on to say, after coffee, we came over here and were joined by York and later by Hardy. We all read our Eliotic poems and discussed plans of campaign. Coghill thought that if we succeeded, it would always be open to Eliot to say that we had meant the poems seriously and afterwards pretended they were parodies. His answer to this was to make them acrostics, and the ones he had composed read downwards. Sham poetry pays the world in its own coin, paper money, end quote.
That's such a clever twist. It's really amusing to see how they tried to outwit the editors with these layers of parody and acrostics. It definitely adds an extra layer of complexity and humor to their literary pranks, and it's great to see how Lewis and his friends really enjoy playing with language and form. It definitely keeps the whole process lively and entertaining.
He says, then came the brilliant idea that we should be a brother and sister, Rollo and Bridget Considine. Bridget is the elder, and they are united by an affection so tender as to be almost incestuous. Bridget will presently write a letter to Eliot, if we get a foothold, telling him about her own and her brother's life. She is incredibly dowdy and about 35. We rolled in laughter as we pictured a tea party where the Considines meet Eliot. York would dress up for Bridget and perhaps bring a baby. We selected as our first shot my Nidhogg by Rollo and Hardy's Conversation and York's Sunday by Bridget. They are to be sent from Vienna, where Hardy has a friend. We think Vienna will decrease suspicion and is also a likely place for the Considines to live in. Well, this is ridiculous and quite an elaborate ruse that they're trying to put on Robot Lady. What do you think about all this?
It's definitely a wonderfully elaborate and playful scheme. They really went all out with these fictional identities and the elaborate backstories, and it just shows how creative and witty they were in trying to outsmart the literary world. It's a bit of a humorous and cheeky endeavor, and it's fun to imagine them all laughing about it together. It really captures that playful spirit of the time.
It does. They're being very silly. Let's see. Our meeting broke up at about 12. Hardy and Coghill are in it for pure fun. I for burning indignation. So Lewis's pride, I think, is getting the best of him, and perhaps a little bit of jealousy about attention being paid to T.S. Eliot. York chiefly is doing it for the love of mischief. I went to bed feeling, for some reason, very nervy and worn out. Perhaps this morning's dream, or perhaps the exhaustion of so much laughter. So yeah, he was almost ruffling over all of this, Robot Lady. That's the end of that diary entry. I think we'll stop there today. We'll pick up next time with Wednesday, June 16th. Robot Lady, thanks so much, as usual, for all of your help today. Thank you, everyone who joined either live or on the replay, for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome. Robot Lady, before we go, is there anything that you would like to say in closing?
I just want to say thanks so much for having me along on this journey, Jeff. It's always a pleasure diving into Lewis's world and all these fun literary antics. And of course, a huge thank you to everyone joining in, whether live or later on. I'm looking forward to our next session and more adventures with C.S. Lewis. Until then, take care and have a wonderful time.
You take care too, Robot Lady, and to you watching now and everyone else within the sound of my voice. Until next time when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold. Insights and secrets, ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands.